Oh, yeah, you had to do that.
Above and beyond, I'm a phenomenon.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Floor U podcast. I'm Paul Pleshek, joined as usual by my partner in crime, Sonny Callahan. Sonny, how you doing?
Hello, everybody. How you doing, sir?
Can't complain. Okay, I do complain. I complain a lot. I complain a lot.
Every day.
Whine
Every day I talk to you.
all the time. But, nobody's around, so it doesn't matter. So we are joined today by a very special guest, somebody that Sonny and I talked about having on as soon as we started talking about having a podcast, and someone that we couldn't have more respect for and more appreciation for you joining us. Thank you. We have Sim Crisler. How you doing, Sim?
Doing great. Doing great.
Doing great. Looking forward to this.
Well, absolutely. Yeah.
Good
Opportunity to talk to you two guys is always a pleasure.
Well, this will be the first time we've had a long conversation without a cigar in our hand. So
There's that.
Yeah, I'm surprised you're not outside. What is it? It's probably freezing down there, probably like 60 degrees.
yeah, it's in the 60s, so
Yeah.
too cold.
60s,
Burr.
sunshine, not a cloud in the sky.
Sitting in Wisconsin, we got 3 inches of snow on the ground this morning, and you guys are whining about a little bit of maybe a light jacket.
Yeah.
One word of advice to you: move.
Well, I would, but I'm banned from most states, so
It's the only place that, well, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
got
I'll
you.
leave it at that.
the only one that still accepts me.
Yeah, so there'll be few and far between. There'll be times on this show where you see me act like a fanboy, but I am a fan of this guy right here. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate everything you've taught me, sir.
Thank you, Sonny. I
Absolutely.
appreciate that. I do very much. Yeah.
We do appreciate it. For those of you that don't know, Sim, why don't you give us a little background on your career path, where you started, where you ended up, and what you're doing now?
Well, that goes back a long.
That's a long
way.
story.
Pretty much back to when dirt was rocks. Okay, so I first was quote unquote introduced to the flooring business working for my uncle back in the early to mid '60s.
It's always the uncle. It's the
It
mean
is,
uncle.
yeah. And this guy was one of the original developers up in North Fulton County. If you guys around the Atlanta area know kind of where that is. It was when I was born in 1950. It was pretty backwards, but as it began to go along and some roads got open, it began to open up. And my uncle, after retired from Sears and Roebuck, when there was a Sears and Roebuck, and as an executive vice president, and with about 400,000 shares of Sears stock.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, he decided, and he was a Class A personality, had to be doing something. So he started building houses, apartments, restaurants, all sorts of things. And part of that was I might be digging footings for him one day, but part of it, what I kind of gravitated to, was the flooring guys going out, and that was an interesting exposure back in the early '60s. I mean, hot melt tape was just coming out, so guys were spitting tacks, doing all that kind of stuff.
Did they have electricity?
Yep. Well, it was marginal electricity in some parts of where I lived up there,
Yeah,
but
talking Georgia.
basically we did, and got to work.
So
with
these
the
were the
guys.
places. These were in the parts of Georgia where they didn't just rake the dirt on the floor, just move it around a little bit. Get the,
We were. I mean, it was just the beginning of the tackless strip had just become in. Like I said, guys were still, turning tack and spitting tacks. So,
Oh, wow.
stuff like that. And everything was sewn basically at the time. Guys that had been doing it a while, I got, sew some closets and drop them in and that sort of thing. But as I went along, I really appreciated, number one, the physical demands of it. It is a hard way to make a living. Physically
Nothing easy
demanding,
about it.
because I got to do most of the physical stuff being the young guy. I think I was 14 or something at the time, maybe 15. I was just flipping the rolls of old hair and jute pad. Those things are heavy, by the way. But
Well, I've said it before. When I started, it was waffle pad,
Yeah.
and I couldn't carry a full
Yeah.
roll of waffle pad. I had to roll it out, cut it in half, and then carry it in.
this was hair and jute when it really was hair and
Oh,
jute. Okay,
that's a
horsehair
heavy roll.
and jute, and it was heavy. But nonetheless, putting the stuff in, some of the early wall-to-wall carpets about that time, and they did some other stuff too. But basically, I worked with those guys, and by doing that and a bunch of other stuff to make money, I was able to put myself through Georgia Tech from 68 to 72, and I don't think you can come out of there taking no money from my parents and debt free. Not many folks can say
Wow.
that today. Of course,
Especially back then. I mean,
Well,
I
at that-
didn't mean that as a shot, but
No,
back then it
at,
was.
at that time, Georgia Tech, I could go to Georgia Tech for $1,000, not a quarter, a year.
Wow.
No, and that, talk about a quality education for not much money. I can promise you, it was tough. Getting through there. When I got through 4 years, I was so ready to be done with school. You know.
Were there a lot of classes on feelings and?
Oh yeah, a lot of touchy-feely stuff at Georgia Tech. Don't get me started on the swimming course there, okay? You know, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, I'm not touching that.
But guys couldn't graduate because they couldn't pass swimming. Seriously, but it was
Wow.
it was an interesting experience that absolutely tested every part of your makeup. And to get through there, I'm proud of it to have gotten out of there.
With what degree?
Chemistry.
Yep.
But unfortunately, on the football side, it's one of those things where when you're a Georgia Tech fan, you're always disappointed when they lose, but you're never surprised.
Never.
Anyway, but I went through that. Now, after I left, I went to work for then Daring Milliken. That's now Milliken and Company. And at that point in time, I was really not aware when I went to work for them that they had just gotten into the flooring business. They bought the old Callaway Mills operation down here in LaGrange, which is where we're coming from today, and basically got into the quote unquote home furnishings division. A large part of that was floor covering. The rest of it was basically towels, pillowcases, and fabrics. But Milliken ultimately got out of that because they couldn't be a player. But basically went with Milliken, discovered about, 9 months after I went there, they had a floor covering division. I said, well, I'd like to get down there. So I finagled around, got down to LaGrange about 1973, something like that. And I've been here ever since, basically. And was with Milliken for 33 years. And basically, after a number of positions in manufacturing, after the first 2 or 3 years, I moved into the quality assurance area.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, my role was, I was the guy that comes after the parade goes by with the white coveralls and the shovel and the 55-gallon drum. My job, I was tasked to, and basically I did it almost my entire career, except for the first 2 or 3 years. I was tasked to go out and using the skills that I had handling floor covering manually, and also what I'd learned being with Milliken, which was a lot, to make sure that if people had a problem, if we could fix it in the field and make it work and guarantee it. And
Assessing
satisfy
it on the
customer
back end.
and keep it from coming back to the plant. Milliken did not like to ship it out and then have to pay for shipping it back. They did not like that at all. So that was kind of my task. And I got to go during that period of time to last count 83 foreign countries.
Wow.
Every one of the 50 states, the smallest number that I've been to any one state is 5 times. And so, basically all the Canadian provinces, including the Maritimes, got to go a lot of places, see a lot of things. And
Takes a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Did a lot of sweating, a lot of work. And this was
A lot of
out there.
How many? What's your mileage like on your frequent flyer?
Well, I think about 4 million with Delta, about 2 million with Eastern, if you remember Eastern. Anybody remember Eastern? Paul, I don't know if you remember them or not.
I'm too young. I'm too young.
Yeah, right. Sure you are. And then a couple million with them and probably close to 1 million on a bunch of other people. When I started doing some international, it was really before Delta even got into being an international carrier of any consequence, unlike what they are today. But nonetheless.
And in some of those locations, that had to have been biplanes, right?
Oh, trust me. The Havilland Twin Otter, I flew a 5-stop flight from DuQuoin, Illinois to Lafayette, Louisiana. Made 5 stops on the Havilland Twin Otter. And it's basically supposed to be a seaplane, okay? It's supposed to be an aquatic plane with floats on it, to land on the water. But they used it.
You took it right across the middle. Well, it probably stopped on the Mississippi River, didn't it?
That would have been nice, but we had wheels.
You just followed it right
We
down.
had wheels, but a lot of airlines. It was Air Illinois. I remember that. I flew airlines at
Air Illinois.
And
They were a lot of taxes on that one.
But it was.
Surprised
really
that went out of business.
I just wish for the first 5 or 6 years. I started traveling probably about 1975, and the frequent flyer programs didn't come into being until 81.
Oh, wow.
During that time, Milliken had gone completely to synthetic. I mean, not by a little bit, but one day to the next, they went from jute backing to synthetic backing, action back. I mean, they had the first
flipped the
Patchogue
switch.
Plymouth was making it for them, and all kinds of interesting challenges in manufacturing. But the challenges really began when the guys who were used to installing jute got a hold of it, and up in, Paul, in your part of the world, in the upper Midwest,
In winter?
and I saw some places in the upper Midwest where, you know, you're not at the end of the world, but you could hit a 3-iron and hit the end of the world from where I was standing. You know, I mean, it was Williston, North
That's still where I
Dakota,
do it. That's still where I do inspections.
Bemidji, Minnesota, beautiful places like that, and you got to go. But,
all over the place.
but you know, all over the place. So I was traveling. Basically, I had to go out. Obviously, nobody could get the stuff to stay on the floor. It wrinkled. So I had to go out and show them how to install it, reinstall it, and guarantee it for a year's time through a whole season cycle. And I think I did 175 individual restretches all over the place, going all the way from Western Canada down to Florida. And basically never, only had one where it actually was so, it was so stiff, it was actually a latex trowel that was shipped by mistake. And the styrene content, the latex had been jacked way up to see if they could get bare tough binds. And the roll, when we brought it back to returns, I'll never forget this. I was out there because I said, you failed on this one. You got to go out and see what it looks like when it comes back. So they had it coming in. It was nasty, of course. About a 50-foot roll. It was a pretty good size area. Rolled up on a hyster pole. When they unrolled it and popped it off the hyster pole, it dropped down and it rolled itself completely back up. So,
Now that's a sight to see.
so right away he said, well, I don't think I had a real good chance. What it did was it just pulled the tackless out of the floor.
Yeah.
You know?
I'll bet it did.
And I drilled and plugged every piece of tackless I went to was on a concrete floor. I took it along. I drilled and plugged everything because I wasn't going to take any chances. But even that wasn't enough for this thing. So, but
Curling carpet. No, that's a new one. Well, I think we may discuss curling here at some point.
Kind of a different kind of curl. It's an overall kind of curl, you know. Why do you stretch carpet? To anticipate expansion. Well, that's what everybody kind of forgot during this period of time. But I would leave on Sunday and maybe not come back, not the next Sunday, but the following Wednesday, and be gone and hit 10 or 15 different places all over the place. And I wasn't getting any miles for it. That's really bad.
Right.
Of course, I now have an exactly zero balance of all my miles because my wife, it is her mission in life.
Is to see every
to
city.
See every single one of them.
Yeah, every city, not country, city.
And I had somebody ask me just the other day, said, how's your wife doing? I said, well, fine. Why do you ask? I said, well, you haven't been anywhere almost 2 weeks. So I figured she was sick. But anyway, guys,
That's about the time my wife goes, don't you have somewhere you can go?
I left Milligan because of we had some constitutional differences about the way they were doing things. I was not happy at all, but left the 05 and went in partnership with Lou Migliore and LGM and Associates, who's a great guy. We had a wonderful time. Beginning of this year, 2019, we dissolved our partnership. I'm still working with him. We still converse all the time. He calls me whenever he has to do a decimal fraction because he can't do those. So I'll help him out a little bit with the math, you know, but no.
So what's your phone number? I might need some help.
People, United Carpet used to be United Carpet up in Detroit. That's now Bruce's company.
Oh, right.
Amy used to say it's 1-800-CALL SIM. That was what they did when they had a question. But anyway, so I was with there, and we had a wonderful time doing similar things. Lou is an LGM, basically is disinterested third party inspections, expert witness type stuff. Also, to some extent, he also writes a column, which I participated in from time to time every month, the commercial flooring report. So I was with Lou until the beginning of this year. Of course, the entity that was actually a partner with Lou's company, LGM and Associates, was my own company, Specialty Flooring Solutions, which is the LLC I started in 2005. Okay, so Specialty Flooring was a member in Lou's LLC. Separated now, Specialty Flooring Solutions is the company under which I operate currently. So,
and still doing the same thing now. You're doing looking at claims and expert witness work. And
what I do really hasn't changed a great deal from what I was doing, when I was with Milliken. Because I was doing, I must have been in 30 depositions while I was with Milliken because they were getting a lot of lawsuits, patent infringement, that sort of things. Different things after the fire. Lord, there was the lawyers were everywhere at that point in time. I was being deposed every second week, it seemed like. So that's part of what you do in the current position I'm in. And you also are in a position to work with trade associations, which I've been involved with. You notice I'm wearing the FCICA
Yep.
shirt today.
Yep.
I came with them. I'm now a new member. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I saw that.
That was on my
I
badge
did.
last time.
I saw that.
And I've only been in since 1983. Okay.
Yeah, new member.
It's like 6 months after they started. I missed the very first get together that they did, but I was at the second one. I've been at pretty much every one since then. I'm through up and down to the small period of time when they basically closed the doors.
Yeah, almost.
And it now
Shut
I
down.
think is really thriving and doing well. But I put a great deal of stock by trade associations. It's a modality where you can exchange valuable information in a non-competitive environment. And I think that you can't put a value on that. The networking is extremely important. I think I shared with you that when I was out working with Lou, and still to today, some of my most beneficial and lucrative contacts and referrals have come via the FCICA and my contacts with FCICA.
Well, when we were in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago for the show, we interviewed Seth. Seth was our guest, and that was one of the things we talked about.
Yeah.
Is what Seth and I enjoy about FCICA is when we're there, we're not doing the dog and pony show. We're not always on.
Mhm.
It's Sonny and Seth and Brent and Kevin, and we're talking about flooring,
Yes.
and we can interact and share things without being competitors.
Exactly.
So that's the I really do cherish about FCICA, and I did mean to use the word cherish because I do cherish it.
I do.
Because when we go there twice a year, it's some of the best networking and quite honestly fellowship is what I call it with my friends there, and we can relax and talk about things and then have a cigar with you.
And you can't put a value on being able to do that because you can't duplicate it through any other methodology that I'm aware of.
Yep.
I've never been able to get anywhere close to being able to get the information. I also am a member, I'm a paid consultant for Fuse Alliance. Lou does StarNet, basically, but Fuse, and I think that's one of the most better buying groups that I've worked with. They really do a nice job of giving their members great benefits. They really do. But nonetheless, again, that's kind of where I am today, and how I got there.
I would agree with that as FCICA. I think FCICA has a great culture within the membership and the associates, and that interchange is really valuable. You don't always get that with different associations,
No.
and having that ability to share, not just share your experiences, but to have it shared in a respectful way. There's times where you get to things like that, and that all anybody wants to do is prove how smart they are, and
Well, there's still the newcomers still try to do that.
Well, but the thing I don't like is when you come there with an agenda that is not group-based, not community-based, basically, when you're working with something like an FCICA organization. I really, I don't think you can put a real value on getting that type of, I wish more people realize that you have to come and get into that situation before you get the true value.
Right.
You can't appreciate
Not just one
what you're
trip,
paying
right.
your membership dues for, or your sponsorship dues, or whatever it may be. You can't appreciate the value you're getting from that unless you come and participate and enter that environment, that community environment that I feel every time I go to a meeting, and been doing it, since again 1983. I've been coming to the FCICA.
Well, like what you said before about Bruce and Amy. I mean, the value of being able to pick up the phone and call someone like you, it's amazing. But they have that relationship with the Ardexes, with me, with all these other manufacturers, and they just have a direct line to the technical support. And you know what? They're more successful. There's no doubt in my mind they're more successful because they have those outlets.
It's always better to have a number to call and a name at the other than that number.
Right.
When you're dealing with manufacturers in particular. I mean, I was in customer service. I received phone calls, dozens of them, every day on problems, basically. And basically, it's mostly guys who either been to my class or done other things. And I still see people today who remember coming to Milliken. I was teaching the certified installation contractor class. It's a 4-day class for pattern carpet and modular carpet and what have you that we did. And they had to demonstrate certain skills. They became, in effect, the qualifying individual, allowed the dealership that sponsored them or the entity that sponsored them to become a certified contractor.
Okay.
So
Manufacturer-based training.
It was
right?
manufacturer-based training.
Okay.
So I would do, and I still see guys today, I mean, 20 years later, that remember coming to the class and going to the guest house. Mostly that's what they remember. But nonetheless, that's a valuable experience, having a name at the other end of a number you call, rather than trying to call Microsoft customer support. and we won't go into what you hear on the other end. This is Fred from Des Moines, who speaks with an unusual accent.
Thank you for calling. Yes.
But I digress. So
you say that as though that doesn't happen. I mean, when I call down to Dalton, sometimes I think I'm speaking to someone from a foreign country. So.
well, that's
What
why
you
it's so
mean
much
by
better.
that there, Paul?
Oh, well, two people separated by a common language. Yes. The
I thought you were going to say a single chromosome, chromosome.
Lewis, Jeff Foxworthy says, if your family tree does not branch, you might be a redneck.
This is the family tree for Dalton.
Oh, wow. So much for getting shares in Dalton. Oh, here we go.
There it goes. Neighborhood. But that's kind of just a brief look at, where I came from in this business. And, the majority of what I know today, I will contribute to my time I spent with Milliken. I learned a bunch on my hands and knees, but I learned a lot more seeing from how
the
it's
other
made,
side.
all the way from the polymers, the actual, and being a chemist, I can appreciate that, seeing it made through the entire process, and you kind of get the whole overall feel.
You were a large part of the development of carpet tiles too, weren't you?
I was just about the time I came in 72, I guess it wasn't 71. One of these days, my memory will get better. Yeah, right. Believe that.
Better every day.
When I came, that was just beginning to develop modular carpet. And that comes with the whole Milliken interface split. Basically, Ray Anderson was then working for Milliken, at the time. And basically, when Milliken bought Callaway, Ray Anderson, who was the founder and an absolute bona fide card-carrying genius, in my opinion, marketing, manufacturing, everything, but he was working for Callaway at the time that they were bought. And basically, when they decided to go into modular carpet, into carpet tile, they had two different ideas about which technology they should pursue. And basically, unfortunately, when you have the misfortune of being with the company that is purchased, not the purchasing company, your IQ goes down by about 70 points.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, you can several times.
I'm familiar with it.
But basically, of course, Milliken listened to their own people and went to a technology which was good, perfectly wonderful. This is old fusion bonding technology. This is going back away. Almost nobody does it anymore. Milliken's abandoned it. Interfaces abandoned it. It all is either it's the fabric formation is now exclusively tufting for modular carpet. So that notwithstanding, that's kind of a look at where I come from. And keep me off these tangents, or I will disappear from time to time.
Nope, you're fine. You're fine.
That's what we're here. That's what we're here about, really. And
you had mentioned before you had talked about some of the training that you were doing at Milliken, and I think that'd be a good time for us to bring up what we're doing, Paul. We've just finalized and scheduled the very first NAFCT heat weld and flash cove certification course.
So so you're going to bring them in.
We're going to bring them in. We're going to train them, and we're going to give them a certification.
And they got to show you.
Yeah, there's some people are going to fail.
Well, if you don't have people fail,
performance testing. Yes,
it really
it's
doesn't mean
hands-on.
anything. Our failure was low for the certification program I ran. It was probably considerably less. It's about 1%. But because geez, we let the guys use an open book for the written test we gave.
Right.
And they had to basically the practical test was they had to do and show basic skills,
Right.
layout, and installation, and then also in pattern matching and what have you. They had to show those basic skills to be
Right,
certified.
and that's what we're going to do. Ours is going to really be hands-on. You're
Yeah.
going to have to do inside corners, outside corners.
It's got to be.
But we're excited. We got pipe
dates on it?
pigeon.
We got dates on
we've
it.
got,
March 17th, 18th, 19th, and
No, that'd be February.
Oh my God.
February 17th through 19th.
All these people are going to show up in March, and what are you going to do with them? You know?
Yeah, it's February 17th through 19th.
Yeah.
Ardex is graciously hosting it up in Aliquippa.
Oh, at the training center up there?
Yep, in Aliquippa.
Yeah.
And we got Mike Pigeon from Ropey. He's going to be one of the instructors. Daniel Gonzalez, he's an installer.
yeah.
He's going to be an instructor. And we're looking to get one more. We're working with a couple of people right now. We just can't drop the name just yet.
No,
but hoping to have 20 to 25 people. And we're really excited about it. It's the first of many that we're going to do.
Yeah.
And we just found that there was training missing for Resilient altogether.
Yeah.
But especially Flash Cove and Heat Weld, we found that in bigger cities, there's guys, that's all they do. Because they don't have people who can do it. So one person's doing the install, another guy's coming back flashing.
Coming back.
That's or heat welding.
Doing the welding.
That just goes, well, he did it.
Yeah.
That's his fault, and it causes an issue. So if we can train the guy who's going to be doing it all, that would be best. And then once we're done with that, we're going to segue right into a commercial resilient flooring installer certification.
Yeah. And that is a needed thing, really, since Armstrong quit doing their training programs, which were 2 weeks and rigorous as all get out.
Right.
There's really not been anything in the resilient side that took
other than
up the
some
slack.
small manufacturer training,
yeah.
1 day, 2 day,
Yeah.
and you just can't do it like that. You've got to, when you're talking about installation of commercial resilient flooring, 80% of what you're talking about is going to be floor prep. Right? Then a little bit of
We can
layout.
spend 2 days on floor prep alone in the ISSI class.
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
when you're installing resilient flooring, particularly ones that are going to be finished at a fairly high gloss or that come with a high gloss.
Oh, shiny's clean.
Yes, sir. Just keep riding that trowel. When you do that, your floor prep forgiveness goes essentially to zero.
Yeah.
When you get a high gloss, and I like to see so many of the resilient guys today are making at least more of a matte finish.
Right.
A little shiny, but more of a matte finish, so you can't see every single millionth of an inch of imperfection.
Well, when you're using a fine notch trowel, a 16 32nd, 32nd, and you're using it on a corridor and you're going into it semi-wet to get transfer, and then you can still see the trowel marks after that. I mean, that's incredible. So, it's difficult. You just got to make sure you get that floor flat, back roll it.
You got to back roll after you spread it with a notch. That's a hell of a thing, but it's what.
If you know they're going to, if this division talks to this division when they're doing the spec, and they know that, then that's what they should do.
Yeah.
But too many times the guys just don't know.
Communication between divisions.
27 layers of finish on it. There's no way.
Next thing you know, you have the CIA talking to the FBI.
So just to recap on that is going to be February 17th, 18th, and 19th. It's Pittsburgh. It's Aliquippa outside of Pittsburgh, and we're going to be doing it at the Ardex facility. We'll have room information going up on the website and mailers going out hopefully this week yet. And the cost in the class?
Cost of the class is $295, $100 a day. Can't beat it.
3 days.
Yep.
That's
pretty cheap. That's as cheap as we can get. So
you'll make a heck of a lot more than that on your first job.
On your first installation, for sure, you're going to make a premium. You're going to be more valuable to the person who hires you, and that's where you're going to get the money back for sure. So
Absolutely.
We're really excited about it. We've been trying to do it for a while, and we had a smaller class. We had a shortened class at our Resilient Essentials class in Charlotte last year, and it was just so well received. Guys were on the edge of their seat trying to watch. It was Mike Pigeon and William Thornton, if you know William.
I do.
They were doing the class, and we got so involved. We got a third of what we wanted to get done because it was just more detailed than we thought. So we wanted
questions keep coming.
That's it.
As long as they do, you better answer them.
That's right. They wanted to learn. That was the best part.
And you can't get through something, and you had it scheduled for 45 minutes, but yet it takes 3 hours.
Yep.
And it's
That
really
sounds
it's really
sounds like Alex Wiedenhoff when we had him at.
Yeah, you can't. You're going to. I was gonna give a shout out to somebody, but I decided I better not do that.
Well-
I was gonna get somebody, but
That's all right. That's okay. That's okay. But I think it's great though. You guys that's providing a real service with the trend in the flooring business from soft flooring to resilient flooring. I think it's
Yep.
really, really a needed service that you need to do. And, you really ought to think about expanding it. And
no, that's we're going to focus on resilient. You've got CFI who does carpet, you got NWFA who does wood, and nobody's focusing on the fastest growing market segment like you just said.
and
No,
anybody that doesn't get $295 for a class like that.
Yep.
How long?
3 days.
I'm going to go, I'm going to go with my partner Lou in just for a minute. I'm going to channel him just for a minute.
Uh-oh.
Lou's theory, practice, and belief on pricing was that if you tell them the price, if they don't flinch, you're too low. It's called the threshold of pain.
True story.
Pricing,
True story.
Because you really need to think about with the value you're bringing. After you get it established.
That price will go up. There's no doubt the price of this class will go up. And what we're going to do after we do this initial class, we're going to make sure that we've got it the way we want it. We're going to bring it to Dalton, and we're going to invite all the manufacturers
Yes.
to come
I
in.
think
Let's get their support, and then they can start saying, "Hey, look,
Yeah.
you need an NAFCT
Well, better
certified
yet,
installer."
You have to have
Yeah, exactly.
this in order
you have
to
to have it.
to be quote unquote certified
Yeah.
to install my product, and that's very much needful. And once you do that, now you're talking about something where the supply and demand has just shifted to the demand side.
Yeah, exactly.
It already is, in my opinion. There's very little supply and there's a tremendous amount of demand, or at least need. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Paul and I go back and forth on that as far as is there really the shortage of the installers? Because if there was, our contingency is rates would go up if there really was a shortage. I think there's pockets of the country where there's not enough installers, but overall, I don't know. But what we want to do is we want to be able to bring people in, and we've got programs that we're setting up, and we're working with manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to put together a 2-week course. If somebody wants to come in and be an apprentice,
Yes,
that's really going to be a helper. But I'm not supposed to use that word.
I understand. Hey,
But a 2-week course for an apprentice,
Yep.
let them do that and then go out and work with some installers for a while.
Yep.
And if they like it, then they can come back and take the 4 to 5 week course, and then they can graduate being a mechanic.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So we are doing things. We want to introduce, not only train the people who are in the industry, we want to bring in new blood. And we've got a couple of organizations that we've been talking to that have kids who are looking for training and things like that, because there's a lot of them out there who are just not going to go to college.
well, absolutely.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you're looking at the boat schools, the Votech schools,
Right.
things like that. Yeah, that's I think that's a good outlet for that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very honorable way to make a living, and you can make a good bit of money.
You can
doing it.
You can do very well.
You're good at
Sure.
it, and and demand is out there.
Mhm.
It's happening, and so basically, I think you're on the right track with that for sure.
Or
And
you
to
don't
be
even have to be
clearly-
good at it. I mean, look at me. I'm like the Bobby Cox of flooring.
I wasn't going to say anything.
I never was good at actually doing it, but I can coach the hell out of
But
it.
somebody has a chance to come watch like Mike Pigeon,
Oh, yeah,
Heat Wells.
Yeah.
that guy.
I've seen a guy do it before, and he's got the magic hands.
He's talented.
He
There's
really-
no doubt that
It's-
guy's
to come
talented.
to come learn from him for 3 days for $295.
Yeah.
Get out your checkbooks, folks.
So one of the things, not to transition here, because my transitions are always so smooth.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing that you are an expert in claims, you're a chemist, you've worked in the manufacturing industry for most of your career. One of the big concerns, or one of the more common concerns we're seeing today in resilient flooring, is curling or deviation from flat or planar stability,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I've heard that word.
You've heard that word.
Right.
We get manufacturers, some at this point, that are saying that that can't be determined in the field, or that it's installation related, or that it's a result of vapor emissions from the subfloor. In your experience, can you tell whether it's manufacturing related curling in the field, or Is it something that you requires laboratory testing? And
Let me ask this first before you answer that. I want your definition of planar. What is it? Planar instability?
Planar instability.
Instability.
Is the word that,
Kind of
I guess
buzzword.
I'm guilty of coining that word. I don't know. I don't,
That
don't remember hearing it anywhere else before I used it. I wrote it in some articles and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And I
in the
base
flooring report. Yeah.
I base it on the word planar. If you look up the definition of planar, the simple definition is, wait for it, flat. And basically, flat instability means it's not, wait for it, flat. Right?
Stop, you're confusing me.
So, the planar instability, yes, planar, it's actually planar interface instability has to do with a colloidal system, and that's a system where the particle size of the suspended particles is in the nanometer range. It's in the 10 to the minus 6, 10 to the minus 7th centimeter. Tiny, small particles in suspension where you have two phases coming together, and the interface between the phases becomes unstable and not clearly defined. That's really what that really defines, and it's planar interface instability, not just planar instability. But yeah, but as a wise man once said, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. I believe that was the bard himself that said that. But regardless of what you call it, whether you call it curl, you call it dome, you call it cup. Some people, that's a term that's used sometimes. Whatever you call it, it means it's not staying in contact. Whatever the flooring is not staying 100% in contact with the floor. And in my experience, which was only about 48 or 49 years messing with this stuff, in my experience, if you have something that inherently does not lie flat, okay, it does not come out and be in contact with the floor with very, very small variations. Basically, all the glue in the world is not going to make it stay down. Temporarily, yes. I've did some studies when I was in Millikan. I used all kinds of solvent-based and also water-based contacts. I used 2-part moisture-curing polyurethanes. I used some epoxies. 6 months, because I had a carpet tile that I knew was curled. It's curled, no question about it. I glued it down with this stuff, and lo and behold, indeed, it was flat. And came back in a month, it was still flat.
Yeah. When do you get it flat?
It made it about 6 months before just the very edge started coming up. About, in my opinion, you can begin to see with the normal lighting you get in offices and commercial spaces, you can begin to see curl or dome at about a 32nd of an inch. Okay. At a 16th, it knocks you down.
Yeah.
You very much
Trip
can see
over.
it at that point in time. But basically, it was coming back, and now what you've done is you've taken a piece of what's supposed to be a modular floor covering, whether it be LVT, whether it be modular carpet, whatever it may be. You've taken that, and you've now, because now you got to take it out, because you've taken away any possibility of removing the causation factors that caused it to curl in the first place. You've taken away that, and now you got to cut it up in strips that wide just to get it off the floor.
Right.
And you've done your customer a great disservice as you turned what they bought as a modular carpet for the flexibility, removability, replaceability, and you've taken that away from them. So, basically, I haven't found glue to be a viable solution.
Sure.
Either more glue or let's put the glue down a different way. Neither one of those, in my opinion, works.
Well, it's the same principle when you're talking about expansion and contraction, not just being flat or doming. Expansion and contraction. We've had Brent gave that presentation at the Flooring Essentials, right? Was it Brent Fight?
Jim? Was it Brett or Jim?
I think they both did it, but they gave a presentation of thermodynamics and how it affects the flooring, and too many times.
That was
As a
Brett.
as a glue guy, I get this. Well, can't your glue stop that from happening? And it's just like what you say. No, there's no adhesive in the world that's going to keep that from doing that.
No.
If it wants to move, it's going to move, and its strengths are much stronger than a bond line of an adhesive.
It's really, I used to call it gravity upside down, okay? Basically, because it's not so much the ergs or millipascals of force that's being exerted, it's the fact that it's unrelenting. It never stops.
It never stops.
It never stops, and it's continually exerting that, and eventually it wins.
It's going to get,
And so, you wind up wanting to return to, it's whatever, where it wants to be. It's looking for a way to get back there, just like moisture tries to seek equilibrium. Modular floor covering, if it's not inherently flat, it wants to curl, and eventually it will, in my opinion. And most of the people I know, the folks in the industry, agree with that. And
Well, aside from it being a manufactured issue, what outside things can cause the tile to move or to dome or anything? Or are there other things that can cause that other than being the manufactured? Excuse me.
well, in some, if you have a tile that is inherently unstable dimensionally, and that's a whole different animal
Right.
from being unstable in the planar standpoint, flatness standpoint. If it actually expands, obviously, if you've installed the stuff and it actually has an expansion factor, now suddenly you've got more product than you have floor to put it on.
Yeah.
The only result can be this.
Right.
Or this, depending on which that's curl and that's dome or cup, if you want to call it that. And on cup, now I have seen very tiny amounts of cup because some manufacturers of carpet tile build a little dome into it. That has a chance to actually settle out and go away. But in my experience, once the edges lift and it's not the edge flat and just inside the edge is kind of puffy looking, lack of a better word, that has a chance to resolve itself.
Just kind of walk itself out.
And
But even when you're on the site inspection and you look at something that's dimensionally unstable,
Yeah.
you can take a difference between. I mean, you can measure somewhat that in the size of the plank.
Yeah.
If you're accurate enough I've got a couple different ways of doing it, but you can also measure the size of the hole that's there versus the size of the plank.
Yeah.
So those are things that you can determine that the planks change size.
Exactly. And
So
really, to do that, Paul, most of the time, you ask about, can you say that definitively while you're on site without any additional data? And in my own personal preference, I prefer to take samples that are as shipped, as they came from the manufacturer. They hadn't been on the floor, hadn't been cleaned, nothing's been done to them. They're right out of the box, okay? Randomly selected, put them through, and there are very, very rigorous and well-accepted industry tests for dimensional stability. Okay.
But you're still talking about the difference between when you find something that's oversized
Yep.
versus finding something that's the size it's supposed to be, and the hole that was there is smaller, so it was most likely installed cold, right? Or are you talking?
Yeah. It
Are
could
you
be.
talking all of them?
You don't see a lot of change particularly go to carpet tile, modular carpet. It's engineered primarily today with the layers of fiberglass and other stabilizing influences that are actually put into the structure. Typically, it doesn't change much dimensionally. Probably even the most liberal manufacturers don't go much more than 0.1%.
Oh, wow.
And that's not much.
Of
Okay.
the overall size.
Well,
you mean. Yeah.
basically, now if you think about it, we do it metric. It's easier.
Within what temperature range?
Well, that's as determined by one of the stability tests, like the BS 986, or that's actually the EN and European norm 986 today, the ASTM 7570, which is derived from the old Aachen test from Aachen, Germany. It's been around for about 40 years. Basically, you expose the tile to different environmental conditions to simulate, and the industry agrees that it does indeed what they do, it simulates what the product is going to be exposed to in its lifetime. And basically, it will determine, number one, the 7570 test and also the European norm test will determine not only the dimensional change, but they can also observe and quote the planar change, curl and dome, that is precipitated by those same environmental changes. Okay, so you get both of those in that situation. But when I've got one where I think there's expansion, I prefer to see the actual 7570, do the test on it after it's fully conditioned, it's been through the process. What was your dimensional change? But again, to have a failure, you got to have a test procedure to look at whatever's supposedly failing. But what good is a test procedure? What good is shooting if you don't have a target? You know,
Right.
how you going to
There's
learn
no
whether you did any
guidelines,
good? There's no performance standard quoted.
Performance standard, right?
For flatness.
And for flatness or for dimensional change.
Precise.
Yeah. If there's no performance standard quoted, you can't really define a success or a failure. Although, in my position, as an outside industry expert, for lack of a better word, basically, I have some pretty clear ideas that if you allow every tile to shrink 1 millimeter, which is just a little over a 32nd of an inch, that means that every single tile, you're going to have a 16th of an inch gap between every two tiles,
Right.
either in the front and back direction or in the side direction or both. And if it shrinks that much, now if it expands that much, now that can cause curl. That can cause what appears to be planar issues with the tile. It will, because there's more tile or more LVT than there is floor. It was put in, snugged up, and if it then changes dimensions, you got a problem. But most tile today are stabilized so much that if they have, unresolved tensions in the fabric and they want to pull back, they want to shrink a little bit. Now, before, they just would shrink. But if you have them truly stabilized dimensionally, they can't shrink. So that force, instead of causing a change in dimension, causes lift at the edge.
Gotcha. That
See,
makes sense.
so that's kind of, and I understand it's kind of a gray area. I wish manufacturers would come out and take a stand and say, our carpet tile is going to be flat and it will meet this standard on this test.
To this measurement on
Yeah,
this test
yeah.
under these conditions.
Here's the test you run, and here's what the performance standard is, not to exceed, basically.
So
But to Sonny's question, then, what other things can cause that tile from a vinyl plank standpoint as much as possible? But the two relate, modular carpet and they're relative to each other. So I understand that, but
More so with the LVT and the vinyl tile, the conditioning becomes an issue. Because if you put it in at 25 degrees centigrade or 25 degrees Fahrenheit and it warms up to 70, there's going to try to be, particularly in those that are not as rigorously stabilized through climatic change as carpet tile are today, you're going to see some change.
Something's going to move.
If you've installed them nice and snug at 25 degrees and suddenly they become 70, chances are pretty good you're going to get peaks. Both directions, most likely.
and is that an imbalance within the plank then? So where I see it frequently, where it appears to me to be manufacturing related, and you lay the planks down and they're not touching or they're not overlapping, so they're not compressed. Is that the layer? Is that like the decorative layer of the surface that maybe has? I remember during the carpet tile curling process through the dryer, there was some talk about the way it would sag within the dryer, and then by the time they put it all together, that was stretched out, it cooled down, and that's what basically gave it that inherent tension within that would cause the edges to pull up.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the same thing within, or is it more of a composition of the layers that causes the?
Well, normally it's the way the layers are joined together. Everything in the process, when you get a multi-layer product that needs to be flat, you've got to make sure that you have either exactly equal tensions or no tension. And no differential tension, I guess would be the way I want to say it, because if everything has exactly the same amount, there's not going to be any movement. But if you have, let's just say with a carpet tile, you've got the face of the carpet tile, which goes through a manufacturing, it gets tufted, number one, then it's going to have to get probably a binder put on the back of it, which is a continuous process where the material is actually pulled through the process, typically with what are called pin rollers and other situations, sometimes with tenor frames, whatever. Tenor frames stretch widthwise. You got overfeed of a process where you put 100 feet in this end and 101 feet comes out the other end. There's elongation in the machine direction, and there's sometimes expansion in the cross machine direction. Anytime you get that, it wants to go back
Right.
like it was, okay? And so if you join that to something and you don't make sure that, or you make sure that the process itself has very little elongation, and a lot of people have gotten by this by literally carrying the product through the process instead of on a tenor frame, on a belt. So you're supporting it and you're transporting it through, so it doesn't get elongated, so it doesn't have any tendency to come back. That's the front and back edge curl that you see so often. The point in the back of the era typically is
Machine direction.
overfeed somewhere in the process on one of the layers, and typically I would say probably more typically the face and the primary backing, and is probably more likely what you're talking, because if you look at a carpet tile and you talk about the cross-sectional perimeter, okay, the cross-sectional equator, I should say, the midpoint in the cross-section, if there's more tension above, it curls. If there's more tension below the equator, it domes. So, or differential tensions above and below the equator. It's kind of how I look at it, but it needs to be engineered to be flat. And that's, believe me, it ain't easy. That sounds easy. That is the toughest thing.
A little bit of math.
Well, it's a tremendous amount of expertise,
Engineering.
and almost art in manufacturing.
Sure.
And the way the machines are designed, knowing that you've got to make a product that's designed to be a modular carpet and not just a piece of broadloom cut up into tiles,
right.
into pieces. You've got to design a product from the get-go that's designed to do that. Anything else you do.
So to your point, their tension is in the design itself.
Well, it's in the manufacturing.
The balance of the tension is when they know it's got to have it to, that's part of what's got to make it lay flat.
It's in the physical process of manipulating it through manufacturing. Okay, you have to have those processes under control, run exactly the same way, and have to prove that running it that way actually produces a product that's viable.
Right.
Once you establish that, you got to stay very close to those parameters, and you have to monitor them and be aware of them. And all manufacturers basically. Back in the day when Milliken carpet tile came off the end of the line, it went into the cold room at 65 degrees Fahrenheit, 10% relative humidity. And it had to have no more curl than, it was like the sum of all four edges couldn't be greater than, no single lift could be more than this amount. That's a standard.
Right.
Yeah.
Those went out day in and day out, and millions and millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of yards, and it stayed flat. I won't say it all did. Well, some of it they missed, but if you step up with a standard that says, here's a test you need to run, 75-70, whatever, that's probably the only one out there, and here's what it should be.
Yeah.
Here's what the dimensional change should be, and there should be no more. You can use the Aachen test or the 75-70 test for planar change. It's acceptable according to the procedure from ASTM.
Does it
comment
cause
on that? What?
Does it cause it, or is there a change, right?
Yeah, exactly. It is. You use it for dimensional change and for planar change as well.
But there's no pass-fail.
No, there is no. Well,
It's just,
of course,
you're
the
just reporting.
ASTM never, or very rarely, unless they'll sometimes say in the absence of any other standard from a patch manufacturer, glue
1869,
manufacturer, use these standards. This is what you use to determine with. But it goes to the most rigorous standard if there's any question.
Right.
That's typical ASTM stuff. They don't quote standards. None of the bodies who define test procedures typically quote what you should have on that test.
Sure.
They simply tell you how to obtain and what to do to the product to determine its tendencies in that direction.
But on the 75-70, the ASTM standard, that's not something inspectors can do on their own. That's something they need to send out. They've got to send it to a laboratory. Yeah. It takes time.
It takes about a week to do.
You're not going to look at a floor and go, planar instability, I'm going to send it out for 75%. No, you need to do the test, and then you can determine.
You need to, and that's one of the things and you must test uninstalled as shipped product. It's clearly been, it came directly from hopefully an unopened shipping container, a box, and you selected it, and there's a good rigorous chain of custody of what happened to it. From the time
what else will cause it though? What else will cause a consistent curl? So in my experience on a floating floor, you're not going to have compression cause every single tile or every single plank through the installation curl the same amount. You're going to have maybe a buckled area. You're going to have some sign that the flooring's compressed, but you're not going to cause that consistency of variation throughout an installation. So how do you determine in field to give an opinion on whether or not it's site related versus possibly manufacturing related?
If I see consistent, every single plank, if you will, is up about the same amount, that screams manufacturing to me.
Right.
And now, would I still take samples and submit them to a test? The problem is, particularly for LVT and LVP, there's really not a test. I use a test that's called, planar change high and low humidity, which is something that one of the testing labs that I use has kind of invented, and they've submitted it, but so far it hadn't been accepted as an ASTM established test protocol. So
how does high and low humidity affect the?
Well, humidity affects, if it's a pile fabric, it does affect the twist in the yarn.
Okay, so for the carpet, yes, but not the vinyl plank.
Yep. But, I don't have a lot of data to say that it doesn't affect it at all. Because normally when you run that test, when you go warm and damp, whatever it is, whatever original plane was, let's say if it was up 2/32 of an inch or 1/16, it flattens out. But as it gets dry and cool, that's historically the magic formula for causing a product that has any tendency to curl. It'll cause that tendency to manifest.
So
Yeah,
winter in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Got it on the first try.
And I think that's what it is. Just when it gets hotter, you raise the humidity when you do testing, and when you get colder, you reduce the humidity. It's just kind of been the status quo for what we're doing, because we did that for
seasonal
years.
cycle. I mean, starting in about November, actually October, back with Milliken, October through about February became the curling season. When product, if it had tendency to curl, that's when it was going to
That's when it would do it.
And typically product will go down flat, look good, but as you hit that seasonal change, the tendency comes up. And that's manufacturers are aware of that, and they have to be able to manufacture and engineer it to deal with that.
That's why it may take 6 months to resolve a claim, because it may go away. Did I say that out loud?
Hope springs eternal. Okay.
What about concrete vapor emissions then? What high pH, is that the story often is the discussed that'll cause plasticizer migration, that'll cause some issues with changes in the composition of the planks themselves, and thereby cause attention from that. Is that a reasonable line of thought?
I don't know of a single study that definitively links water coming out of the concrete, moisture vapor coming out of the concrete, particularly with the thermoplastic backings you have now. Basically they're polyolefins, most of them now. There's still some PVC out there, but mostly polyolefins, some polyurethanes and what have you, that has basically zero effect on that. As a matter of fact, if anything, putting the product in the region of relatively higher humidity, according to test protocols that I've seen run, it makes it flatter, not more curled. And so, it really takes the problem away. I don't know of any study that says high pH has any effect on any of those backings. So, I don't have anything to indicate that would have an issue with it. That would do an issue. I have seen perfectly flat carpet tile literally sitting in what I affectionately call the soup du jour. When the adhesive underneath has turned to goop. It's just sitting right there perfectly flat in a pH of 13 and obviously liquid water. So if it didn't curl then, it ain't gonna, unless there's something making it curl, because that's as much effect as you could possibly have. Liquid water and a soup of a pH of 13.
Yeah.
You don't have to add any water to that. It's there. So, that's happening. That's as bad as it can be. And yet that tile remains flat. If it's properly engineered, it should remain flat. Now, it does other things. It will attack the adhesive and do some other stuff, but it does not attack the carpet tile.
Oh, Sonny's giving me warnings over there to keep.
I'm about to bust.
Yeah, Sonny's. You're
We're about to go into hour 2, then hour 3.
Okay. Yeah.
Sam, you just want to be on every show?
I just stir the pot. That's all. That's my job.
And then walk away. That's
stir the pot,
part.
walk away, be like a seagull.
Yeah.
But this is information that comes from an area of experience where you've dealt with this on the manufacturing side, and you've done the studies on the materials that were being manufactured in your processes to come to these conclusions. These aren't conclusions that are based on, not experiences that weren't real world. These are real world experiences that were studied.
Yeah, these things that we do in our industry should be based on facts and testing.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
So, where's the test? I'm going to do it.
Go, Sonny, go.
Where's the test that says relative humidity has any effect on floor covering?
Yeah.
Because even Hedenblatt doesn't even. It suggests that it plays a part, but it doesn't really infer that it plays a part on affecting floor covering. But we're making decisions on installation or not installing floors based on relative humidity. And it drives me crazy, because the only people who are benefiting from it are people who sell mitigation systems. And I sell a mitigation system. I get it. But I'm not going to sell you one if you don't need it. I don't think that helps anybody.
Absolutely. I don't disagree. And I don't have, obviously, if there's sufficient relative humidity in the concrete, okay, that will affect some things in the system. Typically, any water-based adhesive is going to be, and some other adhesives as well, will be affected by that. But
Only if it's coming to the surface.
yeah, if it's coming to the surface and it has the capability of condensing to liquid water, because now you've got pH that is in active mode.
Right.
pH is only active and only meaningful in aqueous solution. That's
Without
just
water,
that's
who
just
cares
the
about pH?
definition.
Yep.
You don't have moisture, pH is not an issue. I'm working with Peter Craig right now. We've been having some discussions about a test for pH.
I like his little chip thing he puts down.
That you don't add liquid water to the system that may or may not be there.
Right.
Or may not ever be there.
Yeah, because if you're adding water to the pH test, guess what? You just added the water.
Well,
so
I mean, pH is kind of a, well, what was the pH? Well, what would you like for it to be?
yeah,
Because I can pretty much on any given piece of concrete, I can make it, if you get a 7, I can make that a 10. Not much problem. Okay. So it's.
Well, we had that on one
lot of
claim
discussion.
where it was an odor claim, and the manufacturer was claiming alkaline hydrolysis was causing plasticizer migration, and I pulled up many tiles. There wasn't any moisture anywhere. There was no liquid anywhere.
yep.
So how can you have alkalinity if you don't have liquid, right?
Good question. And then I've seen, alkaline hydrolysis happen. And basically plasticizer migration is a diffusionary phenomenon, okay? It's flowing from a region of higher concentration, which would be the back of the PVC tile, to a region of lesser concentration, which is the concrete underneath and also the adhesive layer underneath. There is a force that moves, and there's a definite, it's fixed first law of diffusion. There is a nice formula but the main driver is concentration 1 over concentration 2, the concentration in the higher and in the lower. That's what drives plasticizer migration. Every single vinyl tile that's ever been made, if you put it right here on this tabletop and you leave it for 3 months, come and take a chip of this, you're going to find the phthalate-based plasticizers in that surface, okay? The question is what the plasticizer goes into, is it going to be happy with the plasticizer? Or is it going to do something funny? Now, to me, and I've had a specific job, a huge big box store that smelled so bad, customers would go in there and write up, "I love your store, but my wife gets sick every time she comes here because it smells so bad." And it was, that smell. These are what are known as higher alcohols. That plasticizer is made from a mixture of higher alcohols and phthalic anhydride. Okay, and they're done. It's called an esterification process, but without going into all that, those higher alcohols by themselves, some of them stink to high heaven. And that's the smell that you're smelling.
It's a very noticeable. Flooring guys will know it as soon as they walk in.
It's noticeable, and it's like the perfume of your first girlfriend. You never forget it.
It's locked in. It's locked in.
You never forget it. Once you smelled it, I can definitively say that it's happening. But I was at a store, and no less a person than Peter Craig had done the moisture study on the store, and he did the pH test where he added water, which if anything is going to give you a false positive. And the pH was 8.5. The moisture vapor emission rate was 2.7. Now, that doesn't, but the in situ RH was 72. And it was like, he did a full forensic study of the store.
Right.
And yet the store smelled. Now, how's that possible? How is that even possible? The only explanation is the plasticizer itself was either improperly manufactured or not properly. It's supposed to be what's called steam distilled after you make the plasticizer to get out all the unreacted monomers. And if you don't do that properly and you don't have it locked together properly, because a lot of plasticizer comes from places where cockroaches can't live, okay? I mean, it does. It comes from places that are less than lovely. And, there's, I forget, 600 million tons, I think, metric tons of plasticizer every year. That's the world use of plasticizer.
I believe it.
That's a lot of plasticizer.
It's
but
a lot.
Nonetheless, you get this stuff, and if it's not properly manufactured, but the what's required to trace it back and actually definitively prove that,
That's impossible.
it's virtually impossible.
It's impossible.
But that to me was hard to prove a negative. But if you got a store that's absolutely perfect, you got a concrete slab that is as perfect as it could possibly be, and you put it on top of it, and boom,
Yeah.
it runs people out of the store, and you can take a piece of that same carpet tile, okay, right out of the box, and you don't expose it to any water. You just expose it to a relative humidity of 55%, and you create alcohols. Now what's going on there?
Yeah.
You know, there's no pH, there's nothing around.
Mhm.
We did a little design experiment that we performed. And this was, you know, it was a big, huge claim I was involved in.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, that to me, you know, plasticizer migration is a phenomenon that occurs
Yep.
in and of itself and as a natural occurrence.
And there's a lot of manufacturers who stick behind the hydrolysis,
Yeah.
and it's just not true.
And migration happens, the hydrolysis happens when either the plasticizer itself is unstable and breaks down for no particular reason, or it does indeed, and thermodynamically, if it encounters a region of active high pH, usually nobody's ever been able to come up with it. It usually is 10.5 to 11 in order to get a significant move of the reaction so that you get enough to where you
To pull
can
it out.
you can get to smell it. You don't
Oh.
pull it out.
Oh, to
it's
get
coming
the
out.
odor. Gotcha.
You're
Gotcha.
breaking it down once it's out.
Yeah.
You know, and so basically, once you get that, you know, you got to get that pH. If it does encounter that, though, it will indeed break down very quickly into its component parts, which are the higher alcohols. And the phthalic anhydride doesn't have any odor, but the alcohols do. And they're what's the thing that you want to look at. I know Howard Kinnear was able to make up concrete coupons, which is little samples of concrete. And he would take plasticizer and paint on them because he'd made them with a very porous, tremendous amount of surface area and had a pH of about 12. And they could get stink in about 2 days. I mean, powerful.
Oh, wow.
And so he had that kind of it's kind of a disease model. You know, like you have to have a disease model before you can treat things. You know, so it basically, that's what I'm saying, guys. Plasticizer migration happens as a matter of diffusion out of the backing, okay? And if it's properly manufactured, shouldn't be a problem.
Mhm.
Shouldn't be a problem.
Properly dosed or properly applied. That's
Yep.
that's typically
So
very.
yeah, but it sounded to me, and maybe I just wasn't comprehending what you were saying, but so if it's properly manufactured and gets to an environment where it's high pH, it can still create an odor.
That's correct. Yes, absolutely.
So-
No questions.
So if you do have, since you already have the migration, the migration is assumed, talking about this, the migration is assumed. If you do have that liquid coming up, so we've got condensation on the back of the tile, we got condensation on the surface,
Yeah.
and now we have the water that's likely high pH, then that is true alkaline hydrolysis,
Yes.
and that's what's causing the odor. But in the absence of water,
Yeah.
it would be manufacturing related.
That's my opinion. Yes. Yeah. Now I've stayed by that chapter and verse that there's no plausible explanation for why that should be happening, other than
Well,
it's a manufacturing issue.
yeah, because I've seen it a lot over an epoxy resin mitigation system, and then put the self leveler on top of it, high quality adhesive. You pull up that tile, you got the bad smell. Pull it up. It's dry as the Mojave Desert.
Absolutely. And I would, you know, you have a situation there where, I mean, the chances of you getting moisture, this is kind of like the big box store I was telling you about where there was no mitigation system there. But, you know, basically the test on the floor itself, full forensic study of the entire, it's about 65,000 square feet, was beautiful.
Yeah.
You pray for a floor like that, you know. It actually was below 75 on average in the in situ RH test. You almost never see that.
Yeah.
But even if that was higher, without a concentration or a condensation of liquid,
Yep.
you still shouldn't have that from a site related aspect. You have to have a liquid you have to have liquid to have pH. You have to have high pH, 10.5 and up,
Yeah.
To
to have hydrolysis
That
to
is
cause the
chemically
breakdown of the
Now,
plasticizer.
you do have, without getting massive amounts of liquid water, as the vapor comes up, okay, and obviously as it comes up, you know, you are going to assume that if you ever get liquid water in that environment, it's going to be fairly elevated in pH. As the capillary structure in the concrete tends to, particularly at the top where it got the old riding trowel, you tend to get a Venturi effect in the capillaries. They neck down, and you can get little micro regions of water there, but
Right at the surface.
Yeah, you'd be able to see that, though. You'd be able to tell that and look and see that's what's going on. But to me, if the floor tests perfectly, you know, there's just no plausible reason for the plasticizer to break down other than that it was not stable to begin with. And this is where you get it right away. When you open the box and you separate 2 tile and the odor comes boiling up and knocks you down.
Right.
How's that the floor?
Right.
It hasn't even seen the floor yet. I had the same situation at this particular job I'm talking about, but they wound up getting the store replaced. So
Yeah, you pull it up, it's juicy on the back.
well, when it smells in the box, you've already got the plasticizer actively breaking down and actively creating the alcohols in the box. I mean, how can that possibly be the floor? And that, to me, tells me there is a possibility, and it does happen. Everything manufactured by human beings can be made badly.
Yep.
We're
We're still imperfect.
Canner is.
Boy, ain't that the truth? Yeah. Everything that's made can be made as a second. It's not first quality material. Likewise with plasticizer, and a lot of it comes from a lot of places where the quality control may not be that great. And I don't have proof for that. That's just a supposition on my part, but it logically makes sense to me.
What's the process then when you actually have that oily substance on the back, where you physically have that the oils, not in a situation where you have the normal changes or the normal.
Yeah. Normally, what that is, it was just a very, very high. Your filler load was very low, and your plasticizer load is a very rich mix of plastisol, which is called when you mix the plasticizer with the vinyl polymer. The vinyl polymer by itself, makes something looks kind of like the old telephones. It's hard, it's bakelite, basically. Okay, it's very, very hard. Not
PVC pipes, and
it's not useful for anything, unless you got plasticizer to make it reliable and workable. But if you obviously have to keep the right ratio between the polymer, PVC polymer, and the phthalate plasticizer. Most of them are phthalates, although there's some other stuff coming around now that is not phthalate-based plasticizers, because there's been a lot of negative press on phthalate-based plasticizers, to say the least. But
I'm sure their replacements won't cause any claims.
If your mixtures are not proper, and you have too much plasticizer, so plasticizer is a liquid. It is a kind of it's kind of like 5-weight motor oil, just a little bit of lubricity to it, and it has a little bit of an odor, but not much. But fully compounded plasticizer, it's when it breaks down, it's where the odor happens. You have to break that liquid into its component parts before you get that odor to happen, the higher alcohol odor. So
but that liquid plasticizer can affect the adhesives, correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it basically makes a surface you can't stick anything to.
Yeah.
Particularly if you get enough where you literally have it, as it leaches out, there's so much of it. And obviously, the amount you're going to have here and the concentration, there's more plasticizer here, the higher concentration. The higher that concentration is, and the bigger the differential between what it's on top of, the more flow you're going to get.
Right. And that's to your point earlier with the tile itself. It's constantly wanting to move, and eventually it's going to give way. It's the same thing with plasticizer. The adhesive can be plasticizer resistant all you want, but if you keep pumping that plasticizer in there, it's going to fail.
Yeah.
There's no water-based adhesive, I should say, that's going to be able to resist all that. Eventually it's going to break.
And you would hope, plasticizer resistant adhesives, typically has an acrylic backbone, because chemically that's capable, and it's not plasticizer proof. It simply is willing to accept
it's
like
a watch. It's resistant, or is it waterproof?
The expected amount of water
Right.
or amount of plasticizer to come into it, and its properties are not affected such that the performance of the overall system would be hit. Okay, that's plasticizer resistance.
Yeah, because when a plasticizer hits a pressure sensitive, it actually makes the glue stronger. It makes it gummier, and it'll hold it down.
It's gooier, but after a while, it's
going to break down.
It becomes, instead of an adhesive, it becomes a lubricant.
Right.
If it gets too greasy, you really can't get it. It won't prevent lateral movement, which is all a pressure sensitive is supposed to do.
Right.
Prevents movement.
It becomes a
soup.
soup.
Yeah.
Ball soup.
Yeah. Even before that, it becomes where it won't prevent the lateral movement resistance, because it just slides across. But
Well, I think at this point, I could do this all day. Obviously, this is a world that this is the part of the business, even the inspections, I enjoy. this isn't work. This is why I've enjoyed doing the podcast, is conversations like this.
It's been fun talking to you guys.
Yeah.
It really has been. Always is.
We
Every
enjoy
time
it.
we do it, it's been fun. But
I prefer the cigar and the joke time, but yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Get on the plane. Come down with you.
We
We got one right here for you.
We got them. They're sitting right there, and I've been looking at them the whole time.
But we probably should wrap it up. I think we got plenty here to talk about for the next time you're on.
Sure, I'm making another trip here. I tell you. Well, speaking of that, I do want to say I want to give a shout out to the Courtyard by Marriott here in LaGrange, Georgia. They let us use their conference room for no charge. They said, just come in and use it. We're on their Wi-Fi. That was really nice of
That
them. So
really
I
is
did
nice.
appreciate it. I
They
really
were
appreciate it.
on me like a cheap suit when I walked through the door.
Yeah.
Right down the hall. Door on the left.
Get in there.
I don't know.
I gave him the warning. I said,
Sim, where can people get a hold of you if they want to pursue information further as far as claims they're
wanna
working
hire
on?
you.
Well,
Where can people find you?
my mobile phone number, which is the best way to get me probably, is area code 706-333-1525. And I'm simply, of course, if you can spell Crisler, you're probably one of among about a million or two, but it's S Crisler, SCRISLER at charter, CHARTER.net. So that's my email address and my phone number. Certainly available anytime. And guys, if anybody wants to call me, the brain picking is free. If you don't ask me to go somewhere or get on a plane or expend some resources, I'd be thrilled to talk to you. I'll help you any way I can.
I would say the value there is priceless anyway. So I think
every time I'm close to them, I look them up. I try to find them.
I can't thank you enough, Sim. It's been a true pleasure having you on here. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for joining us. Sonny, where can they find you?
You can always find me at on my cell phone, which is 407-383-6446 or 1-877-GLUDUDE, GLUDUDE. Glue dude. You like that, don't you? That's pretty damn good.
I do like that, yeah. Yeah,
Easy to remember. You can reach the podcast at Paul at Floor U Podcast, and you can reach me at Paul at Floor Claim Solutions, Paul at NAFCT. Just type in Paul, it'll probably get to me.
It'll get you.
We got the website, floorupodcast.com. Please look into the heat weld class. That's going to be February 17th, 18th, and 19th, and
we'll start doing email blasts next week.
And that's going to be in Pittsburgh, and they got a great facility there. They really do.
Sounds
It's going to be
good people.
It's going to be a great class. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Sim,
Thank you,
Sonny,
Thank you.
thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see y'all next week. I believe we've got Corey Dickerson coming in from.
Corey, going to make it back next week?
That's the 12th, isn't it?
All right.
I
Yep.
think it's the 12th. So, yeah, we tried him once before, and that's going to be another great interview.
Good.
So,
Yep.
Super.
That was a
thank
good
you
one.
very much.
Yeah.
All
You
right.
guys have a great week, and we will see you, everybody else, next week.
Thank you, Paul. Talk to you later.
Hope nothing I said will get you banned from the airwaves,